the golden age of discussion, where no topic is too controversial. Welcome to Kitchener Today with your host, Brian Burke, on 570 News.
Walk that walk, talk that talk, walk that walk, talk that talk, walk that walk, talk that talk.
The coronavirus continuing to expand across the globe. 66 confirmed cases here in Canada, according to Johns Hopkins University, which has been mapping this around the world. Next door, the United States, things have, grown exponentially the last few days. Well over 600 confirmed cases in the United States right now. And already we are seeing some changes. We're starting to getting a little bit more communication inside this particular corporate structure over the last little while about the things you can do to be more careful about passing things on, how to clean, what to clean, when to clean. And you know what, we've been thinking about, what should we do as we greet visitors to our little facility here. Frank Newman is with Newman Human Resources. 35 years of experience in human resources for small and medium-sized businesses. Frank has been a guest before, and he has sent out basically, I would say, a list of things to think about if you're someone who is responsible for employees as we go into a period that is very unusual. Good afternoon, Frank.
Hi, Brian. How are you doing today?
I'm not so bad. This is a situation that we haven't really seen a lot in the past, isn't it?
Well, the closest we've seen recently was the SARS outbreak a few years ago, where we suddenly had to start thinking about how do we treat employees in the workplace and how do we plan in the event that employees cannot come into work or are quarantined. So we have seen this in the past, but it's a pretty rare occurrence. And obviously at this point, we're not sure about the extent to which people will be quarantined or not able to come into work.
Let's talk about some of the things on your list here. The first one you have, which is obviously the most important one, is employee communications.
Yeah, precisely. So with companies at the moment, the key thing companies want to do is to make sure employees feel confident that companies are making the right plans. And also, two, employees want to be confident that the companies can still deliver products and services. And so taking some time now to develop a coronavirus playbook, I'll call it, makes perfect sense because people need some certainty about what will happen in the event that they are quarantined or they have to work from home. And it's really taking time to ensure we've thought about things, we've anticipated the worst, and quite frankly, we're hoping the worst will never take place. But this is a good time to be thinking about that from a point of view of disaster recovery management, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're panicking because, as I said to somebody today, look, it's a pretty good bet that your house isn't going to burn down, yet you still buy insurance for it. Right? It's kind of the same situation.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is no different than planning in case the building next to your factory catches on fire and you have to evacuate for 2 days or 3 days. So it's really just emergency planning that people need to be aware of. And how to keep the business running to the extent they can, because we're trying to guarantee people's salaries. At the same time, we're trying to guarantee that we can deliver services that are needed, whether it's healthcare or education or simply getting hamburgers out.
And you also mentioned the idea of cross-training staff, which is interesting. Not everybody's going to be able to do every job, but making sure that the key parts of keeping your business running on a day-to-day level are actually capable of being done by somebody if someone needs to be quarantined.
Exactly. And, most companies have training plans for individuals. And I talk to lots of companies and say, yes, we're going to do cross-training. But quite frankly, often it doesn't happen. And so this is a good time for companies to think about, well, how do I man a reception desk if Sarah is ill? Or how am I going to get my month end done if half my finance team is quarantined at home and they need access to printers? So this can be seen as actually a very positive event because if you think about the key positions and do we have a backup for the warehouse person, do we have a backup for the receptionist, just taking time to do that. And this is a good time to say we're being proactive, we're going to make sure you're trained, and these skills may obviously help in the future as well for people.
You talk about work from home policies as well. While that's become more common, I don't know how common it is among small and medium-sized businesses to say, yeah, here are our work at home policies. It's just kind of a good thing to have in place.
Exactly. And, we take a lot of things around work for granted, work from home for granted. But as you say, some, larger companies are probably okay for this because they'll have all the tools and technology. But for smaller companies, putting some ground rules in place, like, for example, if I'm working from home, do I have to phone my boss to say I'm signing in because they might be tracking the hours? And also thinking about how is the team going to communicate with each other? And so this becomes an opportunity to will really manage virtual teams. And virtual teams typically have a team huddled in the morning over the phone. The supervisor may call in to check on them during the day. But putting those in place, and then also, what are the security arrangements for working from home? Everything from signing in to even taking documentation home. If you're in an accounting firm, there may be a caveat on moving information out in the office. So it's really taking time to just document that so people know this is what's going to happen if I work at home and I'm not going to get in trouble. So getting those expectations clear.
You also mentioned in your piece about sick pay policies, there have been some changes to provincial laws surrounding that, but getting, the chance to sit down with the people who are working with you and explain the way the sick pay system works probably eliminates a lot of problems down the road.
Exactly. And here you get two types of companies. You have companies that do have sick pay policies. So if you're off for 3 or 4 days, you'll be paid, or in some cases, maybe longer. But a lot of smaller employees don't have sick pay policies. And so if you're quarantined, you may find yourself having to use vacation to make up that time, or you may find yourself in a no pay situation, in which case you could apply for EI as part of that process. But for people that haven't been through this before, making sure that they know what their obligations are and their rights is very important. Companies also have the opportunity to decide, well, if we're going to close for a week, maybe we will pay everyone for that week, and then they can make up the time after. But it's worthwhile as a management thinking about how you're going to handle that, because you can generate a lot of goodwill through making the right decisions. Or you can also alienate people if you say, well, we're just not going to pay you at all, nor allow you to make up the time.
You also mentioned a lot of things that, and a lot of this is, I notice, things that we probably should do if we're running a business anyways, but stuff tends to fall through the cracks. Updating people's personal contacts.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is something organizations should do all the time, but in an age where people change cell phones and they change addresses, so making sure you've got up-to-date contact lists for people. And if you extend it to the worst case scenario, making sure people are looking at their insurance beneficiaries. I've seen lots of cases where the unexpected happens and somebody's been separated and divorced and they still have their former spouse on their beneficiaries. So it takes nothing to ask people to update that, and this should be done as a matter of course every couple of years in any case.
I've already seen this happen in a few places, the reduction in physical contact, like it's gone to the point of we're not going to shake hands anymore, all that kind of thing. If nothing else, it's good to have the discussion, I would think, at a workplace. Yeah,
because you don't want some people continuing to shake hands. You don't want some people fist bumping and they're saying, what the heck are you doing? And it's also even thinking about scheduling your shifts. So, for example, if you're running 7/24 and you're running 3 8-hour shifts, traditionally you'll want the shifts to overlap. So there'll be a half-hour shift overlap as they transition from the day shift to the afternoon shift. During these situations, you may want to limit the amount of overlap, and you may say, well, one shift finished, the other shift ended, and there's a different way to do the shift overlap. And that way you don't, quote, accidentally contaminate one shift with the other shift just in case somebody is ill. So it's thinking about practical ways to keep the business running without necessarily engaging in too much physical contact. The other thing I'm also seeing is a lot of organizations are canceling travel plans and unnecessary customer contact. So I think we're going to see a real boom in Skype meetings, Zoom meetings, and also companies using forms of e-chat to keep in touch with people.
Frank, you worked for GlaxoSmithKline, right, when they were developing the vaccine for SARS?
That's correct. Yeah, I worked for GlaxoSmithKline, and that was the company that was developing the H1N1 vaccine to deal with the flu pandemic a few years ago. And we had some interesting challenges there because we didn't want to contaminate, obviously, the product, but also we couldn't have any cross-contamination with our employees. So we, in fact, limited people going into the warehouse where we stored the products so that people would, we discouraged meetings there, we discouraged contact, and we shifted everything to phone communication because we were, to say the least, deathly afraid that our people would actually contaminate the product. So again, that physical contact has to be thought about and managed, and we're just being prudent here. We're not being alarmist.
But that must have been a pretty stressful time, and some people handle stress differently than others.
Exactly, and I think this is where we're becoming more aware of mental illness and mental stress in the workplace. So for companies that have EAP programs, employee assistance programs, this is a really good time to remind people about those resources, because people may be feeling the stress themselves, just being an anxious time. They may have people who are quarantined. They may know of others who are quarantined. So to the extent that we can, we want to provide them as much mental health support as we can. And if you have an EAP program, that's great. If not, you can always send out some tips to people just in terms of how to handle stress. But we do want people to keep talking about this.
And I wonder out there, Frank, because I know there are people who look at this as alarmist and they look at this as hype, but this is just a really good opportunity in a way that would cross across all kinds of different human and maybe natural disasters. Just a way to be ready, because I think our readiness is often questioned, and maybe rightly so.
Yeah, this concept of readiness, we just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. As I say, there could be, we've had natural disasters in the past, we've had floods, we've had business interruption. And so this is just common sense planning, but it's often the type of thing we put off because we don't believe it'll ever happen. And quite frankly, this, having worked in the pharmaceutical industry, there will be a vaccine. It will be coming, and that this will eventually go away. So this is an opportunity to take a time now to say, let's address these issues. Let's make our people feel confident, and that's the key thing, because we don't want people panicking or worrying unduly, but just being practical.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing for some companies is they provide their employees with out-of-country travel insurance, and this is also a good time. Not that people are thinking too much about travel, but making sure that if they are going to travel for whatever reason, they make sure they double-check their policy to make sure it has the right level of coverage, if indeed it will cover in case they do get quarantined.
I know that you mentioned your involvement with the GlaxoSmithKline, and back in those days that we've seen it before. It's just a little different now, just because of the power of social media and the ability to get these messages out, which was completely different 17 years ago. I think it leads to people's heightened awareness and concerns.
Yes, and certainly, as I talk to my clients, the number of conversations that are taking place around the coronavirus is extreme now, and people are reacting very quickly. So organizations have to get on top of this now, because this is kind of a nice little window, because it really hasn't impacted Canada dramatically at this point. So if we can get ahead of this curve, we can keep confidence in our systems going, and we can continue to make sure people go to work, feel safe, and also know that their team members are also looking after them, because we have an obligation to look after each other. So best practices, communication, that's going to keep people sane and comfortable and not in a panic mode.
Frank, thanks for your time today.
Very good. You're always welcome, Brian. You take care.
You too. Frank Newman from Newman Human Resources here in Kitchener with his just little tips about how to ready your workplace. I get it. The odds are pretty good at this point that you're not going to contract it. But this is useful for a variety of other things, any kind of large work disruption, whether that might be a flood or, Lord knows, you get a 50-centimeter snowfall. What do you do in these cases? Being prepared, there's nothing wrong with that. And again, I caution against panic at all times. I was in Costco on Saturday morning, and I swear I was the only person not buying toilet paper. They had plenty. The stuff you see about, toilet paper's missing, everybody's run out. Not true. Okay, they had plenty. And then I left there and I went to another store that was not a Costco, and they too had plenty. And then I went to a third store and they too had plenty. So, the lack of toilet paper doesn't really appear to be an issue. Certainly not from the amount that I saw people buying on Saturday. Although I will admit, this is where the herd mentality comes in. I looked at those shopping carts with 2 big containers of toilet paper and I thought, maybe I should. But I resisted it, and I did not. Mostly because I like to get in and out of Costco as fast as possible. I already had my thing. I'm out. I'm done. Star 570 570-2545 1-800-570-5715. This is Get Your Today on 570 News.